While Plaid Model S deliveries have now officially begun, let's not forget the original time Plaid was first talked about on stage way back at the end of 2017. It was just when we thought the Tesla Semi event had wrapped up. This is my personal favorite Tesla event we've ever had. The back of the Semi trailer opened up and a redesigned Roadster came out, and no one thought this was coming, and they flexed at amazing numbers like 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds, which has now been achieved, roll out subtracted, of course, and the idea of having a Plaid powertrain with 2 motors in the back, 1 motor in the front, and insane range was first introduced to the public, and Tesla said that it wouldn't come out until 2020. Here we are halfway through 2021, and Tesla did not quite hit their deadline, and they didn't quite deliver the product we were expecting, but in a way, I bet if you asked Tesla, they would feel they somewhat delivered on that Plaid promise, because now we do have triple motor Teslas driving around on public streets in customers' hands. We have a yoke steering design that has been incorporated into a production vehicle. We have sub 2 second 0 to 60 times and pretty dang good range, plus not to mention this is a extremely fast vehicle that can sit 5 people, have a lot of space in the back, which is definitely more practical than the Tesla Roadster, and even with that recent price hike, it's $70,000 cheaper than the Tesla Roadster was promised to be. So Tesla's not canceling the Roadster in favor of the Plaid Model S, but now the question remains, how does Tesla top itself, right? How do they justify the Roadster when the Plaid Model S is able to achieve these insane numbers at a much lower cost with much more practicality? Well, as we've talked about before, Tesla has confirmed that they are planning on doing a SpaceX package with the Roadster that will shoot cold gas thrusters out the back and drop the license plate and essentially allow for insane acceleration that can even beat the Plaid Model S, achieving a 0 to 60 time of 1.1 seconds. And Elon has alluded to it briefly flying for small periods of time, which I don't even know how that's possible. But the truth is, I think Tesla is going to intentionally wait on the Roadster because the Plaid Model S was just delivered. There's really not much point in immediately topping yourself in the near future, and on previous podcasts, Elon has alluded that the Roadster is like dessert. That's kind of the last thing they're going to do because it's such a low volume vehicle that has a lot more to do with brand reputation and how it impacts the look of EVs as a whole. And because of that, I think that's why Tesla's going to prioritize essentially everything else. So until the Semi is being produced and delivered, and the Cybertruck, and the made in Germany Model Y, and the made in Texas Model Y, all of those things have to be mass produced and delivered before Tesla will consider making even a few Roadsters and probably getting through that initial 80 that they have to give away for the referral program. Elon talked about how the motors used in the Plaid Model S are some of the most advanced in the world, and the reason he calls it alien technology is because of the insane manufacturing techniques they use on these carbon fiber sleeve rotors. And on top of that, Tesla does not want to have a transmission system, which means that to get the Plaid Model S to 200 miles per hour, that means you have to spin the motor at around 20,000 RPM. And if you guys can recall, the Tesla Roadster was expected to go over 250 miles per hour, and because it's been nearly 4 years since that original unveiling, I do expect it to beat all of the specs of that original prototype, which is something that Franz has also said in interviews. And I think you kind of have to when people have been waiting for the Roadster for this long, and I don't think they're gonna incorporate a transmission system. I think they're mainly just going to try to figure out a way to get these motors to run at an even higher RPM without, of course, melting the motors away, and the fact that this vehicle is overall smaller than the Model S and probably a bit lighter should help with some acceleration and some handling with this vehicle. And I think overall, the design of the exterior of the Roadster is honestly what's going to sell itself more than the Model S, because the specifications of the Model S are insanely good, and I'm very impressed with the interior redesign, and I'm a big fan of the steering yoke and everything. But the truth is, the Model S is still a nearly 10-year-old design, and the reason people will spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars even on hypercars isn't necessarily strictly because of the specs and the range and the 0 to 60 times. It also has a lot to do with your status in trying to flex how much money you're willing to spend on a vehicle, and I don't think the Plaid Model S quite has the same flexing capabilities when there's tons of Model S's that have been on the road for many, many years, and we've got some design tweaks on the exterior, but for the most part, it hasn't fundamentally changed much, and I think the Roadster is going to be far more eye-catching from an exterior point of view, and yeah, the specs are going to help, and that lower price point is going to make it kind of accessible to much more people out out there who are looking for a two-door sports car with insane range and insanely good specifications, but ultimately making it a lower volume vehicle that hasn't been on the road for a long time. In fact, the Tesla Roadsters that exist today, which are still driving around, don't even support supercharging. So that says how much has changed in Tesla's history since the last Roadster has existed. And knowing that the Tesla Roadster is more than likely going to be incorporating 4680s, I think it makes sense for Tesla to keep using the older 18650 batteries in the Plaid Model S currently. And because the Roadster is dessert, I'm not really expecting it to get delivered until probably the second half of next year. If anything, probably the fourth quarter, kind of last minute. I mean, it could end up going later because it's such a low volume vehicle. Tesla will have a very hard time justifying it when 4680s are going to be such a commodity and they're going to be so low in supply and so high in demand between all their different factories. I'm hoping by around this time next year, Giga Texas will be producing their own batteries and Giga Berlin will be at least somewhat close, but because of all the paperwork and all of the legal battles they have to go through over there, I wouldn't be shocked if it ends up taking longer than that. But the exciting thing to look forward to is that Tesla has said the Roadster is going to be even better than that original prototype we saw, and I think there's a lot of design changes that could be incorporated as well. For those who didn't know, the Tesla Roadster prototype that they've unveiled in 2017 actually had tiny mini gear stocks on it that I thought looked kind of elegant and cool. Obviously, the Plaid Model S has ended up ditching those entirely, so it makes sense to me that the updated Tesla Roadster will probably have a yoke with capacitive buttons on it and no gear stocks at all, just to match its Plaid Model S brother. And simultaneously, everything in the lineup really, including the Cybertruck, which isn't even out yet, is pretty much all moved to the landscape display, which we now see on the Model S and X, and Tesla even bragged about how the landscape display is much better for viewing content and it's much better for their user interface. And I saw that as Elon kind of alluding to portrait mode displays are kind of a thing of the past, and that original Tesla Roadster prototype still had a portrait mode display on the inside. So I have not seen a ton of concepts on how exactly Tesla could make the Roadster look good with a 17-inch landscape display. My suggestion would be to make something with ultra-thin bezels and maybe using some mini LED technology so that it has extreme dynamic range or even a high refresh rate, just because it's the Roadster. This is supposed to be, you know, the king of all Teslas, best range, best specifications out there. Not the most practical, but it's very expensive, and I'm sure the profit margins on this are going to be pretty high. So yeah, just go all out crazy. Of course, give it the same graphics card that the Plaid Model S had, maybe even something better, and allow it to play games at an even higher frame rate than 60 FPS, but it is a smaller vehicle, so finding a way to incorporate a display that's elegant and fits well with that interior, but also more immersive and I think more practical than that prototype, which looks cool in pictures, but honestly I don't think would be very useful because of how narrow and small it is in day-to-day driving, and also where do you put your phone when you want to charge it, or where do you want more cup holders and that kind of thing. But another hot take I'll throw in today's prediction video on how I think the Roadster will be able to top the Plaid Model S. I actually think the production line for the Roadster is not going to be that autonomous. It'll probably be hand-built by a team of specialized engineers that are trying to make sure the paint is perfect and the panel gaps are really thin. And because of that, I don't really see a future where the Tesla Roadster has a certain sized battery pack with 4680s, and it also has another sized 4680 battery pack to accommodate for the cold gas thrusters with that SpaceX package. So I know that right now, Tesla has said on the record that the SpaceX package will be optional. I'll go out on a limb here and say because the vehicle is so low volume, it's actually not going to be optional, and this updated Roadster is probably going to be a lot more expensive than $200,000. I would not be shocked if the actual model ends up costing more like $250,000 or even $300,000, and because of the insane specs it'll be able to achieve, no one will really consider that overpriced because it's going to be beating the top speed, acceleration, and range of $2 or $3 million hypercars, and this will actually be produced at somewhat high scale relative to those hyper vehicles which they only build 100 or 200 of. And because they don't want to have too much customization between the internals, they're just going to decide that the SpaceX package is standard, and I guess the only way I could see it not going that way is if they decide that the 4-seater option is not standard, and if you opt for the SpaceX package you only have 2 seats and you get rid of those afterthought back seats that you gotta crawl into, which I think was Tesla trying to somewhat flex that this is kind of a practical sports car, but now that the Plaid Model S exists, I don't think Tesla is really gonna care about that demographic anymore. They're like, okay, if you want a really fast vehicle and you want to sit 4 to 5 people, the Plaid Model S is for you. But if you're willing to buy the Roadster, this is a vehicle that's built all around insane acceleration, and if only Spaceballs had a joke that was built to go further than Plaid, they would definitely use it on the Roadster. But because they don't, I'm predicting that the SpaceX package is just going to be a standard feature, and the Roadsters are going to be a bit more expensive than we thought, but I expect thanks to the 4680s, they're also going to be a lot longer range than we originally thought, probably over 700 miles. The 0 to 60 is going to be faster than that of the Plaid Model S. The quarter mile time is going to be way below 9 seconds, and the top speed will be far above 250 miles per hour, and because of that SpaceX package and the insane amount of time Tesla has had to develop these next generation motors, I think it might theoretically be able to hit 300 miles per hour, but that's a lot of speculation on my part. I'm curious to hear what you guys think Tesla should do with the Roadster to make it much, much better than the Plaid Model S, and when do you think the Roadster is going to come out? Are there still some of you expecting it by the end of this year, or are you thinking sometime next year is more reasonable? Thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.